Hi, I'm Ellen Nettles from Art Now Media. Thank you so much for coming this evening. I wanted to welcome you, and tonight I am pleased to host a talk with gallery artist Ken Holden on his photographic series, Liquid Flowers. So here's tonight's agenda. I will introduce Ken. He will provide a brief overview of the work. He and I will have a conversation about it, and then we'll leave time for your questions through the chat function on Zoom. He and I have a long association and know each other quite well, so I hope this will lead to a lot of interesting discussion and interplay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Liquid Flowers first. So in this body of work, Ken wanted to study an element of beauty in our everyday lives, which is both tangible and universal to all of humanity. And thus flowers became a subject of interest. These photographs evoke a timelessness of delicate liquid motion captured in his travels. There's a sense of loveliness and individuality in each of these images, which is what makes them so compelling. Regardless of the individual species, a rose, iris, or peony looks at us with distinct personalities and opinions. They are considered and deliberate, not just pretty faces, although they are that too. I know that you will enjoy learning more about them from the artist. To just quote briefly from his bio, Ken Holden creates photographic collections that reflect an existential view of life from two near-death experiences while serving in the United States Marine Corps during the Vietnam War. Wow, I need to age you. Vietnam War. His internal eye captures the beauty of the external natural world while conceptualizing internally the balance between life and death. Holden is educated in cinema and still photography. He uses his fluid hybrid style to capture dramatic atmospheric scenes or vibrant colors to observe the world around him. Ken's distinctive visualization of ideas highlight life in the moment. He exploits his inner near-death experiences to create visual statements. His photographs have been exhibited in museums, published and collected by individuals and corporations. Originally from San Francisco, Ken now resides in Georgia. So before we get started, please note that everyone should stay muted for this call and to please ask questions in the chat function below. I appreciate everyone's courtesy so that we can have as smooth and enjoyable a process as possible. With that being said, it's my great pleasure to introduce the artist Ken Holden. Ken.
Thank you very much, Ellen, and I appreciate you putting this together. I want to thank everyone for attending tonight. Hopefully it will be enlightening and fun. I look forward to the questions that you may raise or have, and hopefully you'll learn a little bit about the Liquid Flowers collection and my background, some of which you may know and some which you may not know or be aware of. So with that, let me do the screen share here.
And Ken was not alive during the Civil War, so I apologize.
And of course, we're already having technical difficulties.
All right, well,
because
a deep breath. We're having some technical difficulties.
My PowerPoint isn't showing up in the share screen mode, which is
well, I can. That's weird.
So let me
okay, let me just make you the host for the time being. See if you can do that now, if it makes a difference.
1 second here. Now, is anyone seeing the
No, we're not.
Okay, let me get out of this mode and bear with me a second, everyone. Okay, I'm going to go to share screen again. There is a slight. I'll get to it eventually. There we go. Finally. Yay.
All right.
Technology.
All right, there we go.
There. All right. Now, I'm assuming everyone can see the title slide here.
Yes.
Right. And again, thank you everyone for attending. Many of you know that I'm not the photographer that I was at the beginning of my venture into photography. As Ellen mentioned, I have my degree in cinematography and still photography, but the background to my work today and all the collections that I've created really stems from a long career in the semiconductor industry. And in that industry, there is a photo-like process called photolithography. And so having a long career in technology, it took me decades to migrate away from technology into the visual arts career. And specifically, that occurred around 2001. And it's quite a beautiful story on how that migration occurred for me. So I had a colleague and I have a friend. His name is Dr. Ajit Paranjape. And he and I were on a business trip to Japan, and we were walking the streets of Tokyo. And I was explaining to Ajit that I have this, deep fondness and passion for photography. And we're stopped on the street and waiting for a traffic light to turn green for us. And Ajit turns to me and he says, "Ken, well, what are you doing about it?" And that was a wake-up call, that moment. And I owe so much to Ajit for inspiring me to take action that night and the following day, where I went out and I purchased my first digital camera. And that's the history of where I began creating photo collections that are based on a number of ideas, thoughts, and interests that I've had over the years. So again, I thank Ajit, I thank Ellen. It's such a beautiful yet simple story, but it has deep meaning for what you're about to see. So that passion led to the very first collection that I made, the Liquid Flowers collection. And the Liquid Flowers is a deep kind of psychological insight into various internal experiences from my 2 near-death experiences in the Marine Corps. So first of all, the flowers in and of themselves are such a joyous means of communicating human emotion, whether that's love, sadness, loss, joy, appreciation, gratitude. It covers the spectrum across all humanity around the world. And I gave a lot of thought to exactly what type of subject I wanted to create as my first collection. And because I was traveling the world at that time, and I had this digital camera that I purchased, I started taking photographs as I walked the streets and visited different locations around the world. Much of the photographic perspective that I have, I try to embed in the visualization from a philosophical point of view. That's to say, the images in and of themselves have a deeper meaning than pure artistic expression on a surface level. The Liquid Flowers collection expresses not only visual beauty, but also a meditative tenderness, where one can reflect on the image and it helps drive the viewer to understand what the image is trying to convey from their own point of view, from their own perspective. This is the blue hydrangea. This is the very first liquid flower I created. And this particular image was photographed in Kamakura, Japan. And I was so excited when I saw the process that was evolving to create this collection. And the stylization I felt was unique enough to warrant further exploration in this medium. So I don't think it's any secret how I got from a kind of point and shoot image, if you will, to an artistic expression. The post-processing of the image is done was done in Photoshop and using a particular tool to achieve this effect. Otherwise, there is no in-depth filtration or any special photographic process other than perhaps increasing contrast and lighting and darkening different areas of the image. So this result was such an inspiration. It was beautiful to me to look at, and it led me, it actually drove me to create a complete body of work, which is now the Liquid Flowers collection. This is a detail from that, and the detail is at 400 times the original size. So you can really see, a lot of the detail that's in the image itself. The fascinating aspect for me is there is an element of impressionism in this collection. Impressionistic painters such as Monet, Seurat, Renoir, and others have influenced the way I interpreted this collection. And again, many of the photographs are representative of a blend of both Impressionism and photographic technology. Another detail. And then the last one here is the Pearl Rose. Captured this one in the garden of my house. And it's both, there's a lot of seasonality to this image. It reminds me of somewhat of a passing thunderstorm that has rained. The beautiful gray palette and the yellow palette are combined to give this very flowing, or fluid rather, effect, as if you're looking into a sky of thunderstorms. And a detail of that image, and then the last shot here is.
It's just beautiful.
See the entire image as it should be on the wall. All right, so let me return it back to.
So I'm just going to reclaim hosting here.
Yep.
And oh, let's see, somebody wants to be admitted, so somebody else is joining our call. All right. So Ken, thank you so much. Before we kind of go into some of the questions I sort of had thought of in advance, I wanted to ask you, very often, the center and the flower feels very real. And it's in the background that you have this sort of impressionistic, sort of fuzzy, soft feeling, that impressionistic feeling in a lot of the photographs. And I just wonder if that's purposeful, or if that's a result of the technique, or how you kind of
It's well, it's both purposeful and a result of the technique. What I was trying to do with the technique is reflecting on my near-death experiences. So going from nothingness, unconsciousness to consciousness, and that transition where in the liquid flowers, you've got this transitional effect of this background. It's soft, it's fluid. There's not a lot of clarity, but there is an impression. And that is, juxtaposed to the crisp sharpness of the center or portions or all of the flower. And so, this dichotomy between the background and the foreground, or the subject, the flower, is a representation of that experience of transitioning from unconsciousness to consciousness.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes them very inspiring, when you understand some of the backdrop by which they were created. And one of the reasons I find them very moving, no matter when you made them or how you made them. I just feel like that's really an important aspect. So, few questions, which I always wonder about, is how did you select which flowers you chose to capture for the series?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, they're basically random captures. As I traveled the world or outside my home, or to local parks, I had a camera and I took photographs of flowers, the flowers that attracted me in a particular way, due to lighting, due to their color, their hue, whether or not they were quite still or the wind was blowing, a breeze, and it was in motion. So all these different aspects would attract me to a particular flower, and I would photograph it.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I guess, can you speak about why the series is called Liquid Flowers? That's always intrigued me.
So the liquidity, is from my point of view, and many other flowers seem to float just beneath a water plane, if you will. So as we look, if we go to a brook or a stream and we look at pebbles, for example, in that stream, in a very shallow flow, then there's this, it's the nuance of the waves of the flow of water, and the stylization to the series for me represents that fluidity, that liquidity.
Okay. All right. Well, you sort of talked a little bit about how you approached the series technically. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about it? I know you mentioned the little bit of processing at the end, but mostly these are as shot. And I think there is, for people who, I know a lot of you know Ken very well, but for people who don't know him so well, he is extremely purposeful in his way of handling things. So I know that he has kind of come up with, from the hydrangea to the white rose, there's a bit of evolution, I think, in the way he's expressed the flowers and who they are. But a lot of it is just very much this journey of capturing these flowers that interest him, that he finds attractive, and then putting them out there in such a way that, as he mentioned, sort of shows this state of mind or state of being, which I think is very cool. Anything else you want to add to the idea about the technology or how that's influenced you?
Well, the technology, of course, you know, one of the beautiful things about photography is the fact that from its invention in 1837, photography has evolved both in terms of hardware, cameras, lenses, you know, accessories, and then also on the wet process side, there are many different types of chemical processes that have been used. And then with the advent of digital technology, that's also evolved, right? So in some ways, photography is on the same plane as a lot of science. There's so much that goes into it, and there's so much to learn, to explore, but it's always a moving target. And this moving target, of course, makes some features on the software side obsolete.
Yeah,
So I cannot replicate today what I did, you know,
interesting.
in 2003 through 2007. So that's when the collection was created, during those years. And then the technology evolved to a point where I could no longer produce the kinds of effects that I wanted to
Mm.
for the series to continue it. So
Feels very poignant.
I've been on pause mode trying to figure how I could reinvent something new with the current technology. That's
Well,
available.
it feels very fleeting, like the life of a flower. So maybe it's
Very
very
much so.
apropos.
Yes.
So I guess I was going to ask about, is this an ongoing series? Will there be more? Not in this vein. I know you're sort of experimenting, and people stay tuned for other developments, but we can't talk to that yet. I guess the next thing I wanted to address is, I feel as though all these flowers have very distinct personalities. They almost have a human affectation to them. Was this purposeful? I mean, I know they're an expression of your experience and capturing beauty, but I really do feel like they're very individualistic, having spent some time looking at them over the years. The iris is very different from the dahlia.
Yes, there was no real intention, you know, to provide a characterization with each of the flowers.
Yes.
The way I approach this particular series and a lot of other collections is, when I view something, often the majority of the time it's already processed in my mind, and it's relatively instant. So if I see a flower, I'm already, you know, on it. If I believe that is a flower that I'd like to include in the liquid flower collection, for example, it's a finished image in my mind before I even take the photograph. So because I'm familiar with the technical approach I use, I know how to see the lighting in a particular way, the camera angle, all these different aspects to create the image. So, you know, there isn't, there's not a conscious effort to create distinctive differences between the types of flowers I photograph.
Well, if you look at the hydrangea, which I know is the blue hydrangea, which was an earlier image, to the pearl rose, right? You do see that they have different characteristics besides being different flowers.
Right.
There's just a different feel to them. And I do feel like if they could talk, they would say different things.
They probably would.
All right. Can you speak about the dichotomy of the flowers and the undercurrent of what they express to you and about you personally, existentially, because I know that is part of your work.
Well, so much of what I do, relates back to the near-death experiences. And I carry that every day, through my life. And it makes for the realization to appreciate life every moment, to have fun and joy and not get too bogged down in all the
Yes.
other stuff that goes on in the world. So there is this kind of push and pull within the image, and there's a contrast between the background and the foreground, as we spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
And the other aspect, though, is often the images look like they're paintings. And I get this feedback from so many people, and it's part of the style of, it's part of my personality in all the collections. I want the viewers of the artwork to look and question what it is they're looking at from a broad spectrum of different points of view. At first impression, it might be, what am I looking at? Is it a photograph? Is it a painting, a watercolor? And then on deeper examination, so that kind of pulls them into the image itself, right? And then they can start looking at, some of the detail. Are there brush strokes, for example? Well, not really, but through the technique I use, it emulates a brush stroke, especially from the Impressionistic era. And so, I think this dichotomy within the image between the background, the foreground, is one that is both purposeful and intentional as a means to get viewers to participate in the artwork.
Well, thank you. Sort of to that point, there's an ongoing interest in flowers in your work. Could you speak about the importance of continuing that dialogue? If you look at some of Ken's work on Art Now Media or on Artsy, you can see that there's just this huge exploration of the natural world as well as the people within it, which I think is really interesting and such an interesting juxtaposition between them. And I really always go back to flowers, and they're sort of like the start. And I didn't know till we had this talk that flowers were the first part of your photographic journey. So maybe if you want to talk just a tad more, if you have anything else to say about.
Well, for me, flowers, again, are a universal language.
Yeah.
They represent so much emotion that we provide one another. And it's such a beautiful subject on so many different levels. It's an expression of love, as we spoke about, or sadness of loss, or just pure joy, right? And it doesn't matter what culture we're from, where we live on the planet. Flowers are just so universal as a means to express some emotional aspect that we want to convey to someone else.
Okay. And sort of, is there anything else you want us to know about them? All the people have tuned in. Is there anything, little tidbit that, what's your favorite? Which of them is your favorite? Do you have a favorite?
I do not have a favorite. All of them are my favorite.
All of your, okay. All right. Well, that.
The point, as an artist using photography, if I'm going to take the time to photograph something, then it's already a favorite.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. The reason is that I love the process of creating. And so going from the field to take the photo, whether I'm walking, I'm on a journey, I'm working around the house, whatever. And I intentionally want to take a photograph of a flower, right? It's purposeful. And so, that is such a beautiful thing because it's a commitment to an end result. And so
Yeah.
that journey, of processing it, capturing the image, processing it, and creating the artwork from it is so fulfilling. It's there are occasions where people will come up to me and they'll say, Ken, why do you do photography? And I said, I'm compelled to do it. It's beyond passion. It's something I just live with. My son, he says, sometimes say, Dad, I'd like to do something without photography. And I don't know how to divorce that from myself, right? Because I see the world all through both, from a cinematographer's point of view, but a photographer's point of view. And it's just embedded in me.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm going to start taking any questions or comments from the chat. So Kathy, thank you for your question, Kathy. Do you feel there is an aspect of memorialization in this series?
Quite frankly, I haven't given much thought to that. It's a great question. Thank you. Now you've given me something to consider.
No, I think I would say that each of these flowers is significant, as Ken said. So even if there's not a linear, this experience to this memory, I think in general, there's this flow of consciousness that goes between Ken's experiences and his thoughts and capturing the flowers, which it may be why it was so important to him in the first place.
Right.
But, I can only speak to what I think about. Anybody else? Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Peter, thank you for your question, but Ken answered it earlier. So any other questions about the flowers or Ken's experience? I always am so appreciative that people come to these and listen and hear about the work, because I really think it is so additive and so helpful to really understanding, a flower is not just a flower, right? There's a whole world of experience and thoughts behind it. So, and these flowers are extraordinary. I encourage you all to go to artnowmedia.com to take a look. And I'm putting the address in the chat. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, ellen@artnowmedia.com. If there are no other questions, I think we'll wrap up. And thank you so much for coming. And Ken, thank you so much for talking about the flowers. And it was such a pleasure. Oh, I just got, it was my pleasure to see such beauty. And then Peter said, do you see these displayed as singular pieces of work, or would they be displayed as a collection?
Great question, Peter, as usual. I think they can stand alone, and they're also beautiful as a collection. In my dining room, I've got 5 in a group grid, and it's just beautiful. They are beautiful images framed. However, other collectors have a single image, and it also looks quite beautiful in their home and in the offices, up on the wall by themselves.
Well, I want to take a special thank you to Ajit for for spurring you on to make these photographs and for also joining this evening. Thank you so much. And thank you for everybody. And thank you, Ken. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening. And I really appreciate this. I will send out the recording after the fact. And please help support the arts. And I appreciate your being here. Have a good evening.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks for hosting this.
Yep. Thank you.
Have a good evening.